What it do, Kaizoku crew? It's your boy Kaizoku Ice, and this is a video that a lot of y'all have been asking for, and I've done a lot of research into this video, so make sure y'all listen for the whole entire video because I think there are some very important tidbits of information that you guys need to know about English versus Japanese One Piece. A lot of y'all have asked me about that topic because I'm sure you guys are seeing the Japanese prices or are just curious in general about, which one to collect, and I am here to talk about the pros and the cons of both. So, in order to even understand about which one to buy first, I think it's really important to understand just how big One Piece is in Japan. One Piece is literally like a religion in Japan. So many people love it of all different ages. It's like almost a sin not to like One Piece there. I mean, it's almost like a way of life, right? One Piece is literally so popular there that Tokyo Tower, which is one of the most iconic landmarks in all of Japan, was literally called Tokyo One Piece Tower. That was from, I believe, like 2015 to 2020. I actually had the opportunity to go there with my dad back in, I think, 2018. And it was amazing. It's literally a One Piece collector's dream. It's a little bit sad that it doesn't exist anymore, but regardless, the fact that one of the most iconic landmarks in Japan was called Tokyo One Piece Tower, that's absolutely insane. So that just clearly shows just how much people love One Piece in Japan. And that's on top of all of the merch. I mean, you can literally buy One Piece packs in your convenience stores, like your 7-Elevens, your Lawsons. I might post a picture here somewhere about, me buying packs at breakfast, right? It's insane how available One Piece is there because, people love One Piece. But then that actually brings me to my next question. If One Piece is so popular in Japan, then how come the Japanese One Piece cards aren't at par with the English prices? I mean, it didn't really make much sense to me because, right, if everybody loves Japan, or if everyone in Japan loves One Piece, then why would those cards not be extremely expensive as opposed to here in America or here in the West? So I actually did a lot of research. I scanned the internet. I asked my friend ChatGPT, and I even went to Japan recently to kind of just understand everything about the One Piece trading card game in Japan. And when it boils down to it, honestly, and I don't mean to offend anyone with this statement, but the biggest difference between Japan and English One Piece markets is that here in the West, we are a little bit greedy. And I say that, very kindly because One Piece is being more seen as an investment vehicle in here in the West as opposed to in Japan, where collecting, or what the One Piece trading card game in Japan is more collector focused, and then here it's more, buy a card and keep it for a while and hopefully the card goes up, as opposed to, collecting the things that you actually want. And that in itself, whether that's a bad or good philosophy, that causes the prices here in the West to go up quite significantly. And that's on top of, there are no real regulations here in the West on scalping, right? Getting product for, retail and then selling it for 2x the price. In Japan, there are a lot more fair processes. They have store limits, they have lotteries, and they have like stricter resale rules that pretty much prevent these inflated prices. Actually, like, fun fact, I might have a video here somewhere, but when I went to Japan in my most recent trip, I went to the Bandai Osaka store and I asked for 2 boxes of EB02, or sorry, not 2. I asked for 10 boxes of EB02 and they looked at me like I was crazy, and then they told me I could only buy 2 boxes. And I was really confused because obviously here in America, you can pretty much buy whatever you want. I'm not sure if it's the same in Europe or anywhere else, but you can pretty much, get, if as long as you have like the funds for it, you can buy as much as you want. But in Japan, because, they cater more towards the collectors and they want it to be a more fair process, they actually put buy limits on their products, which I personally think is a great idea and is honestly a dream for many collectors because, as I was saying earlier, the biggest issue I see here in the West is that people are really just trying to make a buck out of One Piece, which, once again, is not bad at all. I mean, I literally talk about One Piece investing in the cards that you should buy and you shouldn't buy so you can hopefully, make more money for your collection. I think the biggest issue just in general is that people are being priced out of a lot of things. And for example, if a booster box of One Piece here in the West MSRP is about $120, but then the resale price for it's about almost $200, of course, that is going to make all of the cards in that set cost a lot more because you aren't getting those cards at MSRP anymore. And if you're paying $200 for a booster box, then of course everything else is going to go up also, just because you're not gonna, you're trying to get back your money. If you put $200 in, you're not going to sell those same cards at that like $120 MSRP price. You're going to inflate them a little bit more because you need to recoup your money and, maximize your gains pretty much. With all that being said, the reason why the market right now in Japan versus in America or in the West, it's simply because of the psychology behind collecting versus investing. In Japan, it's more about collecting and is a more, you could call it a more healthy kind of environment for collectors. Whereas here in the West, you can still collect, at a pretty, I guess you could say, reasonable price, but at the same time, it's not a sustainable process, right? One of the hardest things is finding product here in the West, whereas in Japan, you can pretty much go into the Bandai store and be able to buy a box whenever you want. When I went, they had every single starter deck. They had, I think, from OP07 all the way to OP11 readily in stock, whereas here, you're very lucky if you walk into Walmart or Target and you find a blister pack for retail, right? And more oftentimes than not, you probably aren't going to be able to find it for retail. You're going to have to go to your local card shop where they might charge a premium of, like 30% to almost 2x the price of actual box at MSRP. So those are everything I said there, I think, is actual fact, but you could also say I'm a little bit biased because I collect mostly, English cards, but I actually did have an Excel sheet. I mean, this wouldn't be a Kaizoku Ice video without an Excel sheet. So let me just pause the recording here and let's go to the Excel. All right, you guys already know what time it is. The moment you've all been waiting for, the Kaizoku Ice Excel sheet special. So in this Excel, we are comparing the English booster box prices versus Japanese booster box prices. And also I have this column here called Japanese 2x hit. And the reason I added this column, which is basically the Japanese booster box price column multiplied by 2, is because in an English booster box, you are guaranteed a minimum of 2 hits, whereas in a Japanese booster box, you are only getting 1 hit per box. So in order to make a more accurate comparison, I multiplied this number by 2, and that's what I have in this column. So in this column here, I have the percent differences for each set. And pretty much, as you guys can see by the numbers, it is a lot cheaper to buy your Japanese booster boxes or 2 booster boxes of Japanese One Piece than it is to get 1 booster box of English. I think the only outlier here is for Paramount War. It seems like it kind of costs a lot to buy OP02 in Japanese versus it does in English. So that's a little bit of an interesting tidbit, but I think that might just be an outlier and that doesn't actually reflect the truth. But overall, as you can see with the other numbers, right? Romance Dawn was a 43% difference. Pillars of Strength, 36%. EB01 was 62% difference. And overall, amongst all the sets that I have currently released, it is 31% cheaper to collect Japanese booster boxes than English. And this kind of brings me back to the whole point of sustainability of collecting. English One Piece is always going to be expensive because of all of the reasons why that I talked about earlier, whereas in Japanese, because of the more fair lottery systems, etc., those prices pretty much stay the same and those boxes stay at MSRP price, and there aren't going to be any artificial inflation of these cards or these booster boxes. So in general, right, like you won't be having to pay $300 for a box of Japanese One Piece, but in English, you might end up having to do that. So that's one tidbit that I thought was very interesting here based on this Excel sheet. And then the next thing I wanted to talk about was the Japanese manga rares. So I did the same comparison. In this column, I have the raw price for a manga rare for each set in English, and then I have the raw price here in Japanese, and I calculated the percent difference. Pretty much everything is what you expect. It is a lot cheaper to collect manga rares in Japanese as opposed to English. There are 2 outliers. There is the Sabo, which is apparently more expensive in Japanese, and then the Rayleigh, which is very weird. It is 20% more in Japanese. I got all these prices from price charting, both the manga rare prices and the Japanese booster box prices. So once again, kind of take all of this with a grain of salt. You might see some different prices on TCG Player or on eBay or even just from your own experiences. But the proof is in the pudding right here. it is clearly cheaper to collect in Japanese than in English. It is 34% cheaper to collect the manga rares in Japanese versus in English. And that's pretty consistent with the booster box prices here. It's 31% cheaper in Japanese for boxes and about 34% cheaper for the manga rares. So by looking at these prices, once again, it is a clear-cut answer that Japanese is better to collect just from a sustainability standpoint and from a collector standpoint. I actually didn't highlight that fact earlier in my video, but when you're looking at English and Japanese One Piece, there is literally no difference between the cards besides the fact that one is in English text and then the other is in Japanese text. I have heard of some cases where some of the foiling patterns might be a little bit different. I know one of my subscribers mentioned that the silver SSP Luffy from OP11 apparently is less glittery in Japanese than it is in English. I personally haven't really taken a look at the English versus the Japanese cards, but it does seem like there might be some cases of, foiling / printing differences in Japanese versus English, but for the most part, overall, the cards are literally identical. So with all that being said, let's wrap up this video and I'll kind of give you guys my main points and whether you should collect English or Japanese One Piece. All right, you guys have seen the Excel, y'all seen the numbers, y'all have heard me yap for the past 10 minutes. Now we'll be answering the actual question, English or Japanese One Piece cards. The answer is so simple, and here it is. It depends. It literally just depends if you are a collector or an investor of One Piece. If you are a collector and you don't mind Japanese text, then it is a no-brainer to collect all the Japanese cards. It saves you 30%, as you guys saw in my Excel sheet, and overall it is a more sustainable and healthier way of collecting. On release days here in the West, I have to drive around town going to different stores like Target and Walmart and praying that I can find some packs and some cards that people haven't already bought out the entire stock for, right? With Japanese One Piece, you don't have to worry about that. You can buy them whenever you want, whether you're in Japan, or you can even order it and have it shipped from Japan here. I mean, you're probably paying maybe a little bit over MSRP, but nothing crazy, maybe like a 5 to 10% difference. And you're going to get your cards on time, and it's just going to save you a lot of heartache, right? But if you are looking for the next Pokemon base set booster box that is $200,000, then you probably are not going to get that with Japanese One Piece, unfortunately, and it makes more sense to collect English One Piece. So, we clearly have seen some of the English One Piece cards 2x and do some exponential gains, right? And you probably aren't going to get that with Japanese One Piece cards. Once again, with Japanese, you're probably going to get fluctuations of prices in between plus minus 5 to 10%, whereas in English, prices are all over the place, right? It might 2x in 3 months, but then might go down another 50% a couple months later, right? You don't really know what you're going to get, or you might know what you're going to get if you watch Kaizoku Ice. But overall, it is a very speculative market still, and it is still, once again, a lot of the prices are being driven by the meta game and the actual playing of the cards, and it's not so much collector focus. But I will say, once it starts getting more collector focus, I think that both English and Japanese One Piece, it will start to rise up a little bit more. And I think that Japanese One Piece will probably benefit more because there are going to be smart people like us who are trying to find, cheaper cards, and Japanese is still a lot cheaper, and maybe Japanese cards end up being the same price as English eventually, over the next 5 to 10 years. With the simultaneous release of Japanese and English in 2026, it will be very interesting to see just how much the prices differ on actual release date, because people are going to be finding out the meta at the same time. People, we might not have a good look at what actual cards look like in, physical copies, so that that might also affect the prices too. But just again, overall, I might be rambling a bit now. If you are a collector, get Japanese One Piece. It's the same card. If you are an investor of One Piece, get English. That has the most potential. But I do love both. And guys, at the end of the day, this is the last thing I'm going to say. Collect and put your money in whichever you want, right? English and Japanese, it doesn't really matter as long as you're having fun with it. Not to be cliche about it all, but as long as you're enjoying the card game, you're enjoying the process, you're making friends, you're building a community, that's really all that matters, right? guys, like, we're not gonna become millionaires off One Piece. Like, I would love to, right? And maybe if you win the championship title card, you get one of those winner cards, you can sell it for a pretty penny, like $100,000. But the vast majority of us, guys, the most we're gonna make off of this is like at most maybe like a couple thousand, $10,000, right? And that in itself is like, it's like nothing to brag about. You know, you can literally put your money in the S&P 500 and get 8% every year, and in the next 30 years you'll be a millionaire a lot quicker than you would with One Piece cards, right? So just have fun with it, guys. We are here to just appreciate what Oda Sensei has given us, and anything more than that is just kind of a bonus, right? So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it is a little bit more clear about what I think about Japanese versus One Piece, and I hope you guys are able to make your own decisions too about whether you would like Japanese or English One Piece. So I'm Kaizoku Ice. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I really appreciate all of you guys. As always, my Kaizoku crew, you are the absolute best to me and to each other. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the week, and I'll catch y'all on the next video.